Welcome back to the Kicks and Picks podcast. Coach Steve here with both Nick and Scotty this week. Nick is back after hanging us out to dry last week, Scotty. He made us take his Lazio money line against previously winless Salernitana, and it was La Granata with the victory over Lazio. So I had to make sure we reminded Nick of that. I don't know if that was planned or not.
Spoiler,
but
guys, I'm going to do it again this week. Spoiler on that.
But you got to give out your own picks this week, so.
True. Well, I mean, Coach,
you
we talked about it when we saw it come through in the text. I immediately called it out. I was like, "This is going to be a horrible way for Lazio to lose," because when Nick is not showing up on the podcast, texting in his picks, and usually we can see at least one or two desperation picks. Like that was the one that stood out like a sore thumb.
Hey, 2-1. That was my only loser, by the way.
It was.
But I was going to come on the show this week with a huge Saudi out agenda, and then he fucked around, beat Celtic, qualified for the next round of Champions League. So it doesn't matter how strongly I feel about him that he can't beat Salernitana. His job is safe. So it was
I'm just going to bring that up. I was going to bring up the fact that your Saudi agenda
took a blow.
Saudi out agenda lasted about 3 days, and then you had to go and ruin it. And and the best part, Scott, is when Nick gives us those picks, he doesn't give us any rationale. It's just like literally like Lazio money line minus 125, and we have to kind of figure out what Nick is thinking. And
you guys know me so well that I listened to it. It's as if I was on the podcast. Like you filled in the pieces so beautifully. I even recorded it and tweeted it out today. I was so proud.
It's a scary thought that we now can read Nick's gambling mind and understand his logic
and his pessimism for his own team. So well, overall 5-4-1 week. So we didn't lose money. We ended up pretty close to even money. The Patreon picks did better, which is always a good thing. So if you're not on Patreon yet, we are giving out winners there. They actually outperform those free picks that we give on here. So that's a benefit to our patrons, I guess. But other than that, we're doing pretty well. Season's still positive. Podlock, I think you said before we came on, Scott, still 9-2-1, right? So we've got another winner there coming later on, and we guarantee it'll be better than Nick's Lazio money line pick. So
can't be worse.
Yeah. All right, so I guess we'll jump right into it. We got a couple Premier League fixtures that are pretty big this weekend over in England, and then we have one big one in Serie A, featuring a couple clubs that played in Champions League today. So let's start in the Premier League. The big one on paper is Man City against Spurs. City at home at the Ethiad minus 340. The draw line is plus 500. Spurs to win plus 750. The over is set at 3.5 at minus 105. The under 3.5 minus 120. I mean, just 3-4 weeks ago we were talking about Spurs top of the table riding high. Now they're down to 5th place after a couple of losses. Now 3 losses on the season, 26 points. City second on 29 points. So not a lot of points separating these sides, but now there's a few teams separating these sides, and things could get really bleak for Tottenham, can't they, Scott, if they don't at least, get a draw in this one?
Well, I think things already are really bleak for Tottenham. I think the odds says it all, right? Like the beginning of this month, we probably would have seen this closer to like a toss-up. We've talked about it in previous years on previous podcasts, but Tottenham have always been a weird bogey team for Manchester City. So they usually would have that going for them. But where things stand now, they still have Ramiro will be out with a suspension. So that's going to hurt them. Last weekend, they had to play Royale and maybe Udogie or somebody else in the center box spot because they just don't have the backups or replacements. Van de Ven is out until probably January, I would presume. Injuries are just mounting. But Bentancur came back from injury and then promptly got taken out by Matty Cash, and now sounds like he's out until end of February. So I think things are bleak for Tottenham. I don't, think that this is really going to do much for them unless they do somehow pull off probably their largest upset in the last 5 years or so of the Premier League. So it's tough. I think the good news is Postecoglou has shown that he can adapt and overcome lots of absences. I just think he's not a miracle worker. So I don't really think Tottenham have much of a chance here. I think the question will be, given the maybe disappointing result City had last weekend against Liverpool, where they looked much better than Liverpool for most of the game, but Liverpool managed to pull out the draw in the end. Do City really kind of crank it up and make sure they take care of business early and often in this one?
Yeah. What I'll say there is I think it's going to be interesting to see what this down to earth, no real expectations, nothing to lose Tottenham is going to look like. You mentioned the change in mentality with the coach. I think that's important. To get the continuity with players that hasn't been possible due to all of the injuries. But is this a game that they rise to the expectation? And when I say that, I don't even necessarily mean getting points. I mean, do they just not get blown out? I think that's a real possibility. I think if I were looking at betting this game, I would consider Tottenham plus 1.75. That's like minus 120. I think that's decent. If City win by 2 goals, you're still getting half your stake back. I think that's a pretty solid way to approach it. Because as you mentioned, I wouldn't call last week disappointing for City. I mean, maybe it is if you're City, but I did like Liverpool. I think you guys even mentioned Liverpool plus half a goal was the play. That came through. I went on with Andrew at the Plus Money Pod, gave out Liverpool plus 0.75. That was a winner. So, I think this isn't the same invincible City that we're used to. I think we've been kind of saying that over the course of the season. They're still very good. Haaland is still a machine. He showed up in the Champions League as he typically does. But, Alvarez for me has only been okay. I think the midfield, they're still really trying to get the best out of it. It's not the same City midfield that they've had over the past 2 years. So you kind of have to like that a little bit if you're Tottenham. I still do think City get the win. I think the odds are this way for a reason, but I'm also not expecting a 4-0 drubbing of Tottenham. I don't think that this is even potentially an over game. I'd probably stay away from the total in this one.
Yeah, it's interesting because City doesn't come in the best form either, especially if they hadn't pulled off that big comeback against Leipzig. You'd be questioning them a little bit more probably too, because they were down 2-0 at halftime yesterday and had to come back with those 3 goals. I think Alvarez's winner was pretty late. Spurs actually beat City last year during one of their probably worst seasons in recent memory, 1-0. That was
they beat them a lot.
That was at Tottenham Stadium, so that the odds weren't so big. I just looked back; they were plus 285 on that day in a 1-0 victory. But yeah, Spurs coming in losing 3 on the trot is big, and then you couple the injuries with that and the suspension of Romero, and it's really going to be like next man up. Who's good enough next man up to hang with a City side that even if City is a little fatigued from playing a midweek tough match that they had to maybe work a little harder than maybe expected at home, they didn't even have to travel for that match, which sometimes can take a little out of you on a European week. So I think a lot of this goes in City's favor. They have drawn 2 in a row in the league against Chelsea and Liverpool. So they're in a pretty tough stretch themselves of other big sides that they're facing. Spurs as well. I mean, they gotta figure something out, because after this they have West Ham home, but then it's Newcastle. So they could really be looking at potentially,
and West Ham isn't a guarantee.
And West Ham's no guarantee. And that's even if they beat West Ham, you could be looking at 5 out of 6 with losses after starting unbeaten. So tough spot for Spurs. I agree that the 3.5 a pretty high number, Nick. Last year we had a 4-2 match at this stadium though. So it's certainly why it's probably in play. The year before, 3-2 Spurs winner at the Ethiad. So the matches at the Etihad tend to be the higher scoring ones. The ones in London tend not to be as high scoring. So I think that has something to do with it as well.
Yes. So my counterpoint to Manchester City and you guys saying maybe they're not playing their best, I think coming off an international break, a club like City, who have the vast majority of their starting 11 and even some of their bench players are out and not training with the club for 2 weeks. And then you come back and Liverpool game is that dreaded 7:30 a.m. Eastern kickoff. So it's like right in the beginning of the weekend. There's going to be rust. I think that's why Liverpool looked pretty poor. And that's why I think City probably disappointed to come away with just the draw, because Liverpool didn't look sharp at all. And I think the second half was against Leipzig in the midweek was really City getting rid of that rust, and they kind of clicked. And I think now they've probably got it going again and they're ready for a busy December period. Spurs, on the other hand, you guys just talked about their run and play for the month of December. Everybody knows December is like that pivotal month where you get like 9 games in a span of 32 days, basically. And it really kind of sets you up for that back half of the season. January doesn't get any better for Spurs. Son, we've talked about a lot. They're going to be gone at the Asia Cup all January. Basuma and Pepe Sarr, who have been midfield presence for Spurs, will be playing at AFCON, so they'll be gone. They've just mentioned Højbjerg and Oliver Skip were two guys that they've been looking to offload probably in the January transfer window because they were considered surplus to requirements. They probably got to keep them around now in January. So in a weird way, like Spurs, it's not even so much about like the impact that these like last 3 weeks have had on them for this season, but it also kind of throws a wrench into some of their like long-term like club building plans where you are probably going to be moving on some of this, third or fourth, level of players, getting some funds in, buying maybe not some key players, but some depth in key positions like center back or maybe even like a attacking midfield for Madison. But now they got to scramble and they got a lot of gaps to fill. Right now we just talked about even with Romero suspended, they don't really have a healthy center back to play in the traditional spot. So a lot of gaps, a lot of concern. If they do find themselves losing 5 out of 6 going into the Christmas period with a disaster of a January potentially looming, like it's the worst possible scenario for Spurs when you look back at what it was in November 1st.
Yeah, all valid points. Go, sorry.
I was just going to say real quick, Nick, before you go, just to add some context to the City point. They are unbeaten in their last 8 in all competitions. So those two draws are really
they look bad because City is giving up way more goals than we're accustomed to seeing from City. But listen, you don't play this game on hopes and dreams or feelings, but it seems to me like if Tottenham come in, play well, well is subjective, obviously. If they come and they get points out of this game somehow, some way, that puts the belief in them that they're, they can do something over the next 4, 5, 6 games. So I think there still is a lot to play for them. Again, this just seems to me like it's too good to be true that City runs out, 3, 4 goal winners. I think Tottenham avoid the mind falls here, and I think that like I wouldn't get trapped by taking like City -2 or something like that.
Yeah, which if you want to bet City, you kind of have to, right? With the way the lines are, you have no choice but to bet a lot of goals or a big margin. All right, so moving on, that takes us to the second big match of the weekend. That is Newcastle hosting Man United. Newcastle comes in at home, even money. The draw line plus 270. United to win on the money line plus 265. The over in this one is set at 2.5 at minus 135. The under 2.5 at plus 110. And this is a one where the two teams are also very tight in the table right now. United is 6th on 24 points. Newcastle 7th on 23 points. The winner could technically leapfrog Spurs if Spurs lose. Could leapfrog each other if you're talking about Newcastle jumping maybe potentially up 2 spots, maybe to 5th in the table to win. So there's a lot to play for here. Both teams coming off draws in the midweek in the Champions League, but in a very different context, I guess you could say. Newcastle's on the road at PSG where maybe they were given a little less chance of winning considering who they were playing, where United blew a 2-goal lead today at Galatasaray. We talk about in the group text how playing at Turkey is tough. We almost gave out Galatasaray double chance or plus half a goal, whatever it was. And then the lines moved too much to give it out on Patreon. And lo and behold, it would have hit in comeback fashion. So, I mean, who comes into this in a better state of mind? I know Newcastle gave up the win late too, but it was on a late penalty kick. Do you think they're maybe in a better frame of mind coming into this one? Or do you think it's, both of them drawing late kind of evens things out?
I'll go first, Scotty, just because I have a couple quick general thoughts. Newcastle, I think, is a team that I have not gotten right personally yet this year. I think as a podcast, we may have done okay with them, but I can't seem to figure them out quite yet. They started off the year okay. Then they had that really brutal stretch that maybe I overvalued them a little bit. And, they struggled. They didn't look good in their first couple of Champions League games. And then now all of a sudden they've turned the table and they look like the Newcastle that we have bet on for a year and a half, right? Where they've just been a fucking wagon for us and we've made a ton of money. So I really don't know what to make of Newcastle. United, on the other hand, I think we've been on the correct side of United bets, maybe more than any other team. We haven't taken them a whole lot, but when we picked them to lose, they've lost. When we picked them to win, had them last week against Everton, they've won. But they're predictable. I just think that they have way too many holes. They have injuries. They haven't improved in 2 or 3 years. They're just like that mid-table team. That's who United is. We saw Onana today, absolutely fucking terrible on the take, as we like to say on this show. He let in 2 ridiculously bad goals, maybe even 3. He was lost. I think
it was ugly.
To the point, like I said, they were predictable in the fact that we all knew they were, even though they were spotted the 2-goal lead, they were going to Turkey and they weren't coming out of there with a win. The 3 of us knew it. We said it. We bet it. It came true, right? So United has been very, very predictable from that sense. This is a classic Nick follow the odds game. Newcastle at home. Odds are telling me that they're going to win. I actually kind of like the over here. I think both teams are scoring enough to warrant it. I think they're both a little suspect on D. United, obviously, a little bit more with Onana. I would lean over 2.5, minus 135. It's just on the edge of what we'd play. But I more so just want to enjoy this game and root for goals. And that's kind of my outlook because I still haven't bought Newcastle 100%. Hell of a game against PSG. Probably deserved to win. I think PSG definitely created more, but I mean, Newcastle did enough to get something out of that game and got a really, really shitty handball or refereeing decision at the end.
Nick, do you want me to shed some light on Newcastle and solve everything for you so you can
Please.
see them and know how to bet them? Newcastle this season in the Premier League at home, they have 6 wins, 1 loss. That 1 loss was the crazy 2-0 or 2-1 comeback by Liverpool when they were down 10 men. Nunez comes on, scores the brace, steals the result.
Okay.
So
very good at home.
Away from
Only 4 seeded too, Scott. Well, you're there at the home.
Away from home, they have 1 win, which was the 8-0 destruction of Sheffield United, who we all assume is going to get relegated. Then they have 2 draws and 3 losses. And if you remove that aberration of Sheffield United, which I know it's their 1 win, but if you remove that, they're actually outscored 5-10 on the road. So Newcastle very strong at home. We saw that in the Champions League too. PSG, they destroyed PSG, I think 4-0 in that first fixture, and then obviously had the 1-1 draw, in Paris. But I think it all comes down to is Newcastle's a really, really good home team right now. They play really well, at home. Howe knows how to get them set up and be aggressive in the attack. They score tons and tons of goals at home. I think they've had 3 matches already out of those 7 where they scored at least 4 goals. So they can explode. Isak is back. You guys, I've talked up Isak for the last 2 years. It's finally starting to pay off for me. He's having a good season when he's healthy. So I really like having him in there. And yeah, Nick, I think you hit the nail on the head with United. I think they're just a mid-table club right now. They've had some good results lately. They've got 3 wins on the run in the Premier League. But if you look at those opponents, it's Fulham, it's Luton Town, and it's Everton.
Yep.
So, not exactly strong competition. So I don't want to say they're fraudulent wins because they're still 9 points, but I think they look better maybe on paper than they do in reality. So I love Newcastle here. I don't want to go too deep into it for reasons you might find out later.
We always feature a game that's a Scotty lock. Like there's never a show that's not true.
It feels like a really good line. And I again, this is maybe one of those lines where I feel better if it's like minus 120. The plus 100 right now gives me a little bit of pause, but I think I get why, because United have been playing a bit better lately. They did score 3 goals in Turkey, which is a tough place to play. We always talk about, you never really want to bet against those Turkish clubs. So I think getting 3 goals is still, a weird positive takeaway they can take away from that match. But I just think Newcastle at home, it's just they are as good as gold at home right now, and it's too tough for me to pass up.
Yeah, just to piggyback before you go, Steve, mentioned United is a mid-table team. I believe that to be true, but beating the bottom 5 teams in the league are what propel you to they're currently in 6th place, right? Like they look a little bit better than they are. They're just a bit better than the mid-table clubs because they're taking care of that business. Good for them. They have 8 wins, no draws, which is like insane through 13 games, but 16 goals scored, 16 goals conceded. Meanwhile, Newcastle have 31 goals. So it's just pretty wild to see.
Yeah, United still have a tough run to finish out their first half of the season. Obviously they have Newcastle this week, Chelsea, which can go one of 2 ways. We've seen Chelsea play really well, like they have against City, and we've also seen them play really poorly, like they just did last weekend. They also have Bournemouth, which should be a win, but after that, it's Liverpool, it's West Ham. We've talked about, can't really count them out. and then Villa before they finish this year at in Nottingham Forest. So, after Newcastle, you have 4 of those 6 matches against teams that are in the top half of the table. Plenty of opportunity for drop points there. So we'll see where they are if they're still in 5th. They might be, or in 6th. They might still be there because I think Tottenham are going to continue to drop. So it's going to be up to Newcastle and maybe Brighton or Villa to kind of surpass them. But they certainly will have the opportunity given the fixture list.
Now's the time for those clubs to make their run, basically, with what Tottenham and United have in front of them. So, sorry, Coach. Just got excited.
I was just gonna. You guys said pretty much all of it, but Scotty made a great point about the home form for Newcastle. The fact they've only conceded 4 times, and I think it's 7 home matches, is huge. And this is the United side that you just pointed out has only scored 16 times all season in 13 matches. 8 times on the road in 6. So, are they going to find a goal or 2? They're probably going to need 2 to win. Are they going to be able to find 2 goals here? I don't know. I was watching some of that match today, and at 3-1, I almost bet double chance live on Galatasaray when they were down by 1, and before I could pull the app up, United literally scored their 3rd goal. I'm like, well, I'm not going to touch it now. It's plus 600, but they're down 2 goals. Like, what are the chances they actually do it? I should have thrown a few dollars on it because I would have cashed it, but hindsight's 2020. But it just shows that United is vulnerable, and I can't trust them. And I think the fact they haven't even drawn a match is very curious after 13 rounds. It doesn't happen too often. But it gives you a little more confidence, so to speak, in Newcastle being able to pull out a win, because if United go down, maybe they don't have enough to come back and get a draw. So I do like that number at even money. I think Newcastle at home is something you have to seriously consider.
I think after this week, because Scotty's going to win his bet, I'm just going to start betting United draw every game until it hits. And, it'll probably hit in the first 2 or 3. The one thing I do want to just stress that, we talk about it. I don't know that we've talked about it enough on the show. I mean, those home and away splits are insane, but that just goes to show you how pivotal home field advantage is. And I feel like we've actually taken a lot of road teams this year, maybe more so than home teams. Obviously, I don't have that in front of me, but I know I personally tend to take a lot of teams on the road just because the numbers playable, right? But this is that perfect example why, right? That home field advantage is immeasurable. I mean, it's huge. And especially in England. I feel like in England more so than many other countries. I mean that, these home stadiums are fucking packed. These teams hate each other. The rivalries are real. There's multiple teams in certain cities. So, really, as you're looking at lines, as you're looking to place bets, I mean, just something to take a look at. I mean, bringing up those home and away splits was the perfect time to talk about it.
It's an advantage unless your name is Burnley and you're 0-7 at home.
Well, they're 0-7 everywhere.
No points at home. So everybody else gets home advantage, but not Burnley.
Yeah, wait until we get to our next game. Maybe that's a good segue, because I got another stat for you guys in this one.
Oh, let's go.
So let's move over to the Italian Peninsula Serie A. Another big one this week for Inter. After their draw with Juve last week, it is Inter at Napoli, defending champions against the team that is looking like the strongest team in Italy and potential champions this year. Napoli plus 175 at home. The draw line plus 230. Inter plus 135. The over is set at 2.5, and it's minus 130. The under is even money. So interesting that we have such big numbers here. It's like kind of take your pick, but let me just give you the background of the standings right now. Updated standings in Italy. Just pulling it up real quick. We have Inter leading the way on 32 points. Napoli is in the last Champions League spot, 4th place right now on 24 points. So what are you making of this one?
Nick, I'll jump into this one because I want to get my stat in because I think it's a good discussion. So we just talked about home and away form. Typically, home is a good place to play unless you're Napoli. So Napoli have yet to win a home game since September 27th.
Whoa.
At home this season, they have 2 wins, 1 draw, and 3 losses. They've been getting it done on the road. They have yet to lose a game on the road with 5 wins and 2 draws in Serie A. So you guys know me. I've been kind of calling out Napoli. I think they are teetering on the precipice of disaster. I think Tottenham is kind of like their worst case scenario, but I certainly think a situation like that is on the table if the injuries happen to like the worst players that it could. And so I'm looking at this Napoli at home Inter on the road getting, plus 135. We talk about Inter, when we did our rundown, Inter the best team in Italy on paper by far.
And just to interject real quick, Scotty, talking about road form, the other undefeated team on the road is Inter at 5-1. They've just played one less match than Napoli on the road.
Yeah.
5 wins,
so
1 draw.
I think this is one where books are kind of saying like, okay, we'll give Napoli a little bit of a nod just because they're the home team, but I don't think it's worth that nod. So I think if I'm putting a wager on this one, I'm hammering Inter.
Yeah, you wouldn't be faulted for it. I'll say that we were talking about the game today, right? Inter played Benfica. I get these teams
away,
confused. Yeah, Benfica
with
away,
pretty much
right?
their second team.
With an entire second team. I mean, I think there was maybe 2 starters, right? Goalie Aldero got his first start. They had Alexis Sanchez up front. Arnautovic got the start, right? So they had basically all their reserves in. They go down, and we had actually a couple people I was talking to who were asking me my opinion on the game. I said either don't bet it, but definitely don't take Inter because they're playing their reserves. They really have not much to play for. They're going to be looking ahead to Napoli. Well, that came true, right? So as that game was starting, it was 1-0 early, 2-0. And I was talking, I forget who, actually Michael Lisi, him and I were chatting back and forth. And I said, bro, like right now, put the mortgage on Inter this week. Like that's what that tells me. They 100% mailed this game in. You knew it based on the lineup, but you could see it right now in the way that they're playing. They're putting everything they have against Napoli. They want to basically put Napoli out of the title race. All the stats that Scotty just gave back that up. I think Inter are the real deal. I think we talked about Lautaro. We talk about him week in and week out. He is leading the league. This podcast said he would lead the league, so that's no surprise there. But I got to give Napoli a little bit of credit. So they fired their coach. You get credit for doing that because he was steering the ship into the iceberg. Mazzarri, not the best appointment, but I think they signed him because they knew it would be a stopgap and like a 1-year deal. They don't have to re-sign him. So is there a newfound resurgence and belief behind this team? Maybe. They went away to Real Madrid today. They didn't look terribly out of place for most of that game. I think they responded a couple of times.
Keyword away.
Away. Yeah. Listen, Meret made a pretty big blunder on that third goal. So that kind of took them out of it. But if Napoli had gone to that game and lost 2-3-0, I feel even more confident. I have to give them some credit. And they've found goals, right? Even with Osimhen out, even with Kvara being 75% of what he was last year, I'll say. They've still managed to find goals. So I have to give them credit for that. Their midfield is still pretty solid. Their wing backs have really found ways to, be effective and get balls into the box and create chaos. So, is it still a derby game, so to speak? I think it is. Does Inter deserve to be favorites? They absolutely do. If I were placing a money line bet, I would be placing that on Inter. I agree with Scott 100%. But it's not going to be the blowout I thought it was going to be 6 hours ago.
So I'm looking at the lines here. My favorite number here, if I'm just looking at a team to win, is probably Inter draw no bet at -135 because it still protects against the draw. And it's still a pretty decent number. I think Inter's the better team here. I didn't realize Napoli's been so bad at home because I always think of the San Paulo as being a pretty tough place to play whenever I watch them at home against other big sides, against my
Steve,
Roma.
I'll interrupt you for a second. They snapped Union Berlin's losing streak, not their winless streak, but that 1-1 draw, like in the Champions League, was horrendous.
Yeah, and that kind of goes to show. I'd be curious to look back at last season if one of you could look while I'm talking here at what their home record was last year under Spalletti when they won the Scudetto, because I'd imagine they probably didn't lose more than a couple games at home in 19. But I like Inter. I mean, you talked about Lautaro. We talked about it. We gave him out as one of our patron picks because he was like plus 160 anytime goal scorer, and he cashed that. He is exceeding expectations, I think, that anybody could have given for him. He's got 13 goals scored on an XG of just 7.61. Right, that's not something you see very often overperforming to that caliber. It shows that how good his finishing has been. And the partnership that they've developed with Thuram on a free transfer has been outstanding. I mean, he's got 6 assists already, Marcus Thuram, to go with another 4 goals. So that partnership has been deadly. It's a big reason why I think Inter is probably going to win the Scudetto. Credit to Juve for holding them last week to 1 goal. I put in a small wager on a hunch last week. I told Nick prior to kickoff. It was Lautaro and under 1.5 goals. They basically bet Inter to win 1-0 with a Lautaro goal. And if it wasn't for that Vlahovic goal, it would have hit because Martinez has been deadly and the Inter defense has been so good. They don't give up a lot. And Nick mentioned the wing backs for Napoli being all right. They can't match DeMarco down that left wing. I mean, the midfield, I think Inter, for the most part, has the advantage. I know Zielinski came off injured today. I don't know if it was more precautionary when he was getting iced up or if it was anything that'll keep him out, but that would be a big loss for them there. And with Mazzarri as the manager, I mean, when he was at Torino, he was always playing that 3-man back line, the original Napoli sides that he managed, 3-man back line. Now he's trying to play a 4. I just don't think they're going to be able to stop Inter going forward to be able to hold them down enough. And I think, Osimhen didn't start today. Is he healthy enough to start on Sunday? Maybe that's why he didn't start in the Champions League today. Maybe they realized that Real Madrid away is probably a tough go. He probably only has 1 start in him coming off that injury. Maybe he could be the guy who gets the goal for Napoli and they can pull off the surprise. But to me, this is, I think you're right. I mean, Inter came back with their second team from down 3-0 and got a draw, which just shows the overall strength of their roster with almost nobody starting. So I like them on the road here. And the fact that they are 5-1 on the road, the one being a draw, not a loss, I really like their chances to get a win. And I would just take that draw no bet just to protect in case Napoli can get a goal or 2 out of Osimhen or somebody else.
No, I love that draw no bet. I agree. Scotty, I don't know if you were able to pull up the stats, but I'm just looking, like, for whatever reason, it pulled up game by game. And I'm just looking at games they lost at home last year. They lost to Milan twice, once in the Champions League, one in the league. They lost to Lazio. They lost to Inter last year at home.
I see
they lost to Cremonese in the Copa. They really.
So they dropped some, but I'm looking at the overall record was they actually had the best home record in the league last year in 22-23. They were 14 wins, 3 draws, 2 losses in league play. So they did drop some in the Champions League and Copa, like you mentioned. They did have only 2 home losses all season last year.
Okay, well then, not the case.
No. Actually, interestingly enough, they had an identical record home and away, 14-3-2 both ways. On a way to their Scudetto win. So it just goes to show how far they've fallen off to. And I think it goes to the point Scotty was making that they could be on the precipice of going the wrong way. I mean, I'm looking at this match as a Roma fan, right? And Roma's got Sassuolo, winnable match for them. God knows what they'll do because we know they bottle those matches sometimes. But I'm looking at that. I'm like, Roma could be in 4th place by the end of this weekend. They could be joint with Napoli and they could be in 4th place. And if you told me that a couple weeks ago, like, that just shows
when we talked Roma Lazio derby. Remember that?
Yeah, like that.
Which team could that propel forward?
Yeah, how topsy turvy has the league been? That teams are dropping these kind of results. That Roma is still is that close to the mix for a top 4 spot right now. It's pretty insane.
Yep. And Lazio still behind Frosinone.
Yes, sir.
Eusebio Di Francesco at his best. Maybe more impressive than beating Barcelona. No match for Scott's Liverpool, though. Or the referee in that match. All right. So anything else you guys want to add to that match before we move on to our locks of the week?
No, I think draw no bets to play. I think you found it. I don't mind the over 2.5. I think both teams have been scoring enough. Inter's defense is good, I think, with Sommer in there. But, I think Napoli can get a goal. I could see a 2-1. I could see a 3-1. But no, that Inter draw no bet at -130 is the play.
Yeah. Just a couple goal scores. The goal score lines are up already, which I'm a little surprised. A little early for that. But Lautaro's +120, Osimhen +130. Then you get a big jump into the 200s for everybody else. So unless you think Thuram's going to score at +240 or someone like that, it's not big payouts.
I guess so. My bold prediction for this game is Inter will get a goal from a midfielder. It's going to be Barella, Fratesi, Mkhitaryan. I don't know who's going to play, who's not going to play. We don't know the lineups, but a midfielder will score a goal for Inter. That's my prediction.
Well, I'll throw some of those numbers out real quick before we go to our locks. Çalhanoğlu +280 takes free kicks, right? You got going down Mkhitaryan +330, Fratesi +400, Barella +600. So. If you believe in any of those midfielders, Nick, there is money to be made for sure. Just got to pick one.
Wait
I
for
think
those lineups.
Çalhanoğlu is my version of Diego Jota for Nick. Like I feel like I throw his name out a lot, and he just never comes close when I'm on him. But when I leave him alone, he's out there putting.
Listen, we could spend another half hour on this game if you guys want to. There's one thing I want to say. I think we joke about it. Like every time there's a big match, I'm waiting really for something out of Barella, and I don't ever tend to see it. I thought he was fucking average, like the 2 games with the national team that were played. I think he was pretty fucking average against Juve last week. I know I wasn't on the show with you guys, but you handicapped that game perfectly. I also had Juve plus 0.25. So we all made money on that game, but like he does good things for a period of time, but I don't see it over a full, like he's never the man of the match in a big game. And like, is this going to be another example of that? Like plus 600, I would love to take a stab with him, but I don't know. I feel like he only scores those goals against fucking Udinese.
And one guy I keep an eye on as like a goal or assist type number would be DeMarco, because he's plus 650 as a goal scorer, the left back. He's got 2 goals and 4 assists this year. He swings in some nice crosses, and he takes some free kicks when they need a left-footed player to take them. I would just keep an eye on what his goal or assist number is, because if it's big enough, it might be worth
if it's in the plus 200 range, I think it's well worth taking. The only issue with the guy like that is he doesn't usually play 90. He's usually good for about 65, 75 minutes. So just a little bit of caution there.
Yeah, minutes per game is right at 70 actually in the league. So pretty good call for not looking at stats there. Yeah, but just like one of those random guys that might have some value. All right, Scott, do you want to kick off the locks of the week here?
Yeah, so I'll start with one of the ones that we've already kind of talked about. It's not the one that Nick is thinking of. I'm taking Manchester City minus 1.5 versus Tottenham. It's minus 130 for all the reasons that we talked about. I think Tottenham are pretty cooked right now. They're still dealing with injuries that we've mentioned. They've got Romero still suspended for this match, so their defense is going to be pretty brutal. It's going to be the type of defense that Holland usually feasts on. So I'd expect him to have at least 1, probably 2, honestly. And like I said, I think City probably are maybe kicking themselves a little bit for letting an opportunity to take 3 points off of Liverpool last weekend go. So I think they'll be better prepared this one, with a full week of practice. So I think City roll over Tottenham 3-0, 4-0, 4-1, something like that. I don't think it's going to be close. So I'll take City with the minus 1.5.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I know I disagreed a little bit in our preview of the match. I for some reason, it just seems a little trappy to me, but I'm going to take a trap game of my own. I think your analysis of the game is obviously correct, right? I hope that City runs out to a 2-3 goal win and you don't have to sweat it, but it's just something about it worries me.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they get a goal in the first half, it should be a pretty clear winner. If they somehow have one of those matches where they just get frustrated in the first half, kind of like they did against Leipzig, then I'll get a little sweaty.
No.
All right, I'm going to stay in England with this one, and it is Brighton double chance plus 110 at Chelsea. Brighton unbeaten in their last 6. Well, United is coming off that beat down at St. James Park to Newcastle, and then tripping up against Galatasaray today. I was shocked when I saw how big of a favorite I'm sorry, this is Chelsea, not United. I mentioned United. Chelsea, I was surprised how big of a favorite they were here. I know Brighton has to play at AEK Athens on Thursday, but having them double chance plus 110, too good to pass up considering they're unbeaten in their last 6. And like I said, Chelsea coming off that beat down against Newcastle I think they're ripe for the picking to at least get a draw from Brighton here.
Yeah, to pull back the curtain a little bit, Coach wanted to have us do a buy or sell on this game. And I refused because I said this game is the definition of mid-table mediocrity right now. I think Brighton have been a little bit disappointing this season. They started off decently, but they've kind of cooled off, had a couple of draws in a row that dropped points. So they're sitting pretty comfortably in 8th right now behind Newcastle. But, last season they were flying and were legitimate top 4 contenders for much of the season. So I'm kind of hoping they catch form again because I think it's a little bit the Premier League is more fun to watch when you have clubs like Brighton doing well.
Mm-hmm. And Brighton's another team. I mentioned it with Newcastle. That I feel the same way about Brighton. I haven't personally gotten them right enough this year to like have an opinion on this game, right? Like
they've been tough this year. They haven't been as reliable as last year.
So I absolutely hope that you're correct. I think double chance is great. Plus money. Anytime you like a team and you can get plus money with a double chance, you have to take it. So we will ride.
It's a good bounce back opportunity for them too. Yep. You know, they've dropped points to some lesser sides lately. So I think a win here would kind of get them right on track for a busy December.
Yeah, I like it. All right, I'm going to give out my trap line 1 of 3 because, as I have done for the past month, I am going to be specializing in trap lines. And this one is Juve. Juve on the money line. They are even money plus 100 away to Monza. I think it's, we're about 50-50, right? Like I've gotten trapped on some of them on our disaster week a few weeks back, but I've done pretty well outside of that 0-3 week. So, we talked about Juve a lot. They are potentially soon to be league leaders. They're getting even fucking money. They're playing Monza. Monza is a great little story. They're doing well. They're in the top half of the table. But this game is made for Max Allegri. And I think coming off of what to them will probably be a disappointing draw to Inter, right? They were in the driver's seat for much of that game. They scored the first goal. This is, no midweek game. This is a perfect bounce back for them. I had them at like minus 160, minus 170 for this game. So got to take them at even money.
It's crazy that there was a time where Juve were banned from the bet slip, but now we are backing them on the regular and still doing pretty well with it.
I was going to say probably made more money with Juve this year than any other team.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the only reason I can think that they're even money is that Monza is unbeaten at home, 2 wins, 4 draws.
There we go.
That's about the only thing I can think of.
Again, and I think Monza's playing really well, but do you trust them to beat Juve?
No.
I got to see it first.
Say it, Nick. They're due.
They could be due. They could, like, if this were Lazio, I'm backing Monza all day, but I don't think they're good enough to beat Juve.
I think this is like a 1-0 type Juve win if they go and
classic Juve,
because Monza doesn't score a lot. Juve doesn't score a lot on the road. They also don't concede almost anything. So you're going to probably see Allegri do his usual Allegri ball and just try to get that goal in the counter and get the win. But Monza is tough at home, but Juve even money is tough to pass up for sure.
Yeah. All right. Second lock for me. I'm going to the formula that's worked out pretty well for me. Worked out for me last weekend in the patron props. The shot on target parlay hit. Thank you, Mbemo and Sterling. So I'm going to do a little parlay of my own this week. I'm taking Arsenal money line. They're playing Wolves, and Brentford money line. They're playing Luton Town. Parlay together, it's right around minus 110. Keep an eye on that with the parlays. They tend to shift, but should be around even money. Wolves are tricky. I'll give them that. We talked about them kind of coming out of nowhere at certain times, but then also looking like doo-doo other games. So it's a tough one to pin down, but Arsenal being at home, coming off a big, I think it's like 6-0 was the final score against Lens midweek.
6 different goal scorers.
Yeah, and that's the story of Arsenal. It's crazy. Like I think I wrote in my recap for happyhoursports.net that they only have 2 players that had more than 4 goal involvements in the league this season. It's very spread out. They get them from everybody, and they seem to get them at really opportune times. Last week, they got a really clutch goal from Kai Havertz. I think it was like the 80th minute to win it for them. So I like Arsenal getting a result here, even if Wolves are going to have one of their more tricky performances. Brentford, I think Brentford have been doing quietly really well in recent weeks. I know they had a couple beat downs, but I think they've kind of turned the corner a little bit. Unlucky to lose against Arsenal last weekend. I thought they played really well. And Luton Town are a little bit in form. When I say that, I mean they won their last match, but for Luton Town, that's as streaky as it gets for them. But I think they're due for a letdown. Brentford at home is a tough foe. So I think Brentford can get the win here, get themselves back on track. And like I said, parlay together, minus 110. It's a pretty good deal.
Love.
All right.
I'm going at least 3 or 4 on those parlays.
Yeah. I think I only had one loss. That was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I took a pause, but we're going to get back into it.
Sorry. All right, I'm going to go to La Liga for my next pick. It's Real Sociedad. They're on the road at Osasuna. They're plus 125 in the money line. They're coming off back-to-back league wins, and then they had the disappointing 0-0 draw at home in the Champions League today against Salzburg, but they dominated that match. 71% possession, 21 shots. Unfortunate not to win that one. It'll make for an interesting last Champions League match against Inter, but in terms of Sociedad, I'm not worried about them having to travel to Osasuna, who has who's in 14th place, and they've really struggled both home and away. So I'm not too concerned about any home field advantage in this one. They actually have 4 losses in 7 home matches, so they look to be ripe for the picking. I'm going Sociedad. I think they'll be ready to play, maybe probably a little bit angry after the midweek result, and will keep up their winning streak in La Liga at plus 125.
Yeah, listen, I'm going to ride that. I'm going to go Coach Worldwide, Nick Worldwide, and join you in Spain. I like Real Betis on the money line, plus 110 at Almeria. Want everybody to know, very, very, very strongly considered Atletico Madrid double chance for this third lock, but we found a better bet in searching through that, and that is Real Betis. They're in 7th place, but they are unbeaten in their last 5. They're plus money at winless last place Almeria. Stop me if you've heard this before. It's like deja vu, except I'm here. It's like I'm here to man up and say it out loud. 3 draws, 11 losses. Is it a trap? Maybe. Do we have to take it? Absolutely. If I could make another team get their first win, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I same thing with Lazio last week. I will live with this loss. There's no way that you can bet the other way on this game.
I guess I like that. As I said, the good news is that Sarri isn't managing Real Betis last time I checked. So yeah, maybe there's a chance there.
I also like this one at first glance as I was going through looking for picks. I didn't dig as deep as you to see that Almeria is in last place with no points, or not no points, no wins.
3 points.
3 points. So
14 matches. Like,
so I'll probably ride this one with you. Maybe that'll curse it. Maybe
no. We need to bring all the good juju that we can. But like, I don't know how we don't bet this.
Yeah, when you get a team like this plus 110, I know they do play tomorrow in either Europa. I think in Europa League. You still got to take it, though, against a team of that caliber.
Yeah. All right. I'll bring it home. My third and final lock of the weekend. Another match we talked about. I'll keep this one short and simple. I am taking Newcastle money line plus 100 versus United. Like we mentioned, their home atmosphere and their home record speaks for itself. They're a very, very easy pick when they're at home. Isak is back. Looks like they're firing on all cylinders. So I'm going to take this one and not look back.
All right. Probably tipped my cap a little bit as I was going off on a rant about Serie A's table and Roma, but they're playing at Sassuolo. I'm taking their team total over 1.5 at minus 110. Sassuolo just bleeds goals. Roma's finally starting to get all their pieces of the attack back, and it seems like they're going to be resting Dybala and Pellegrini tomorrow in the Europa League to try to keep them fresh. This looks like a good spot to take my boys to score at least 2 against a frail Sassuolo backline. I really like them on the money line too, but we know crazy things can happen, but sometimes when these teams go head to head, you get like these 3-2 results. I think Roma scores 2 here.
It's not a lock, but I would even consider playing Roma's team total 2.5. Like, I think that's how bad Sassuolo's defense is. I'm not advocating for it just yet, but I'm saying that it is in play. Just saying. All right, I'm going to stick with Italy and go to Atalanta, draw no bet, minus 130 at Torino. I think Atalanta, another team happy to be in that top 7, top 8 mix. Pretty tough loss at Napoli last week. I will say I am very encouraged that Lookman finally scored a goal. I really expected a lot from him this year. I thought he had a great year last year, his first in Serie A. I thought he would build upon that. He hasn't looked good. Did get a goal. I think Torino has looked like Torino, right? They play okay against the teams around them. They typically edge out some wins and some points against the bad teams, and they fold against any team with a little bit of skill. So we're talking about 2-0 loss to Bologna last week. They've lost to Milan. They've lost to Inter. They've lost to Lazio. They've lost to Juve. I think Atalanta is in that category. I think they're going to be a little too much. You can get them at plus 140 on the money line as of this recording, so I would not fault you if you went for that plus 140, but I think minus 130, draw no bet. Crazier things have happened, but I like Atalanta in this one.
All right.
I think Atalanta were our first team of Italy that we used to bet and make tons of money on. So
yes,
I'm glad that you have the classic in Atalanta in here, but also the new with Juve. It feels like it's a really good mix.
I appreciate it.
And Nick, you said we found a better bet in that Atletico match. So give it to us as our podlock.
Yeah. So I mentioned Atletico is taking on Barcelona. They are traveling to Barcelona. There are a couple bets that I personally liked. I think that we were kind of in between. I think the double chance is -110. They actually have more goals scored and fewer conceded than Barca. So shout out. This is like a new age Atletico. But where we are is actually the over 2.5. It's -130. Both teams averaging right around 2 goals scored and just about a goal conceded. So I think a lot of attacking play. We got 4 goals out of an Atletico game this midweek. I think we got 3 goals out of the Barca game this midweek. Short rest, I think, is a huge benefit for an over. And these teams are going to be playing for a win. So I think we get 3 goals easily. I don't know that any time over the last 5 years you would have any of us taken Atletico Madrid over. I can actually remember a time where their lines were set at 2 goals, sometimes even 1.5, the over under. So to see it at 2.5 and to take it, this is it's a new era, and we're going to ride it to a podlock win.
Yes, our 10th podlock win. It's a big number.
Yes. 9-2-1 on the year, guys, with the game of the week here, plus 6.1 units.
Very different Atletico this year. I mean, even in the Champions League, when you look at some of these, apps like Live Score will give their predictions sometimes and stuff like that, and it's like over 2.5, and you're like, Atletico, what? But it's been happening. So I like it. It's something you don't expect, and heck, your double chance might even be something to look at too.
Yeah, I think so. I think Barca's struggling.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Wait, stall for 2 seconds, Steve, because you're gonna make me pull up these stats here. So Atletico, they are in first place in the group, right? 3 wins, 2 draws in the Champions League, 15 goals for in 5 games. So they themselves are averaging 3 goals a game, 6 conceded. So, well over 4 goals a game, just in Atletico games in the Champions League. So when you put another attacking team like Barca in the mix, love to see this one get to fucking 3 goals.
Simeone has changed in ways Allegri could never dream of as a manager, it seems.
Or Sadi, for that matter.
Had to get one more in.
Had to.
Had to kill Sadi. So we'll leave it there. We got nothing more to add on to that. Of course, like we mentioned earlier, check out our Patreon page for our patron picks and other content we've been putting there. happyhoursports.net. We're contributing there too on a weekly basis. Of course, social media, follow us there for all of our tweets that especially Nick is putting out. Nick is killing it on Twitter. Follow him, Nick Diani, on Twitter. And thanks again for listening.